Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. This week's questions answered video. What are my thoughts on the Las Vegas massacre? This is, and will probably remain for quite some time, a pretty complicated topic. As of the filming of this video, it's been less than 7 days since the shooting. And it was a bad shooting. I mean, I don't think anybody is going to dispute that. The media, of course, is touting the fact that it's, the worst shooting in modern U.S. history, and they're right. It is the worst shooting in modern U.S. history. If you want some interesting history trivia, look up what the worst one was and who was responsible for it. But that's a different conversation. What we had was a gentleman who, as far as I'm concerned, put a lot of thought and a lot of planning into his attack. Now, the conspiracy theories were flying around the very night, the next day, and they've gotten worse since then. People are demanding to know the motive. My feeling on motive is, in the vast majority, and I know I don't have to say vast before I say majority because that's what majority means, but I want to underscore the importance of the word majority. So the vast majority of crimes, motive is factually irrelevant. Someone's motivation to do something is not necessarily material to what they actually do. You can never really truly know another person's motivations. Even if they're telling you why they're doing something, or they write why they did something, you don't know if that was actually the motivation behind it. You're kind of trusting them to tell you what's going on in their brain, which is kind of if you want to say, more of a philosophical discussion than a factual one, which is what motive is. The problem with conspiracy, or the attempt at conspiracy, or the fact that you think the government's hiding something, is they're not going to instantly release all the information. We get used to the 24-hour news cycle, and we just assume that we're going to get information as it becomes available to law enforcement. That's not the case. Certain information is going to be kept sensitive until it is deemed safe to release to the public, because if they don't, they might release something that could in some way jeopardize the investigation. It's assumed that he acted alone, but of course the important word there is assumed. If they release information that could endanger investigation into any assisting parties or any accomplices or anybody who conspired with him to commit this event, then while it may be cool to read about it on Facebook 24 hours after the shooting, it's going to seriously jeopardize the investigation. Evidence is the same thing. People are like, oh, well, why weren't they releasing photos of the guns? Let us see the guns. Because really, it comes down to the same thing. Like, you can't just throw evidence out there to sate the public's need for information if it's going to jeopardize an investigation. You say, well, if he acted alone, it shouldn't be a big deal if they release the information. And that's true, but they don't know if he acted alone. And that's how investigations work. As far as the theories that there were other shooters, I'll just say this. You're assuming that someone is smart enough to carry out a conspiracy of multiple shooters in a hotel, but they're so stupid that super detective sleuths on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook are going to figure it out. So someone's smart enough to do a conspiracy, but so dumb that the random guys on 4chan figured it out. And I know there's all kinds of internet detectives out there detecting shit, and that's fine. But I'm not going to get involved in conspiracies because the investigation hasn't come to a close yet. I'm not saying it's out of the question. I'm saying that there's really no concrete evidence right now to the fact, other than people's interpretations of things they think they see in videos and things they think they see in photos. A couple photos were leaked out, including one of the shooter's body, and guys are saying, well, it wouldn't look like that. And my question to me is, like, how do you know that? Are you a crime scene investigator? Have you seen suicides before? Have you seen more than one suicide to see if they're different in certain occasions? Have you seen suicides where the person shot themselves more than once? Because that happens. A lot of questions there. So I'm not going to try to detect based on a single photo that's taken out of context and really shouldn't have been leaked yet in the first place. It should have been officially released maybe, but leaks can compromise investigations. So now that I got what will probably result in the most downvotes to this video out of the way, if there are any, other thoughts. Thoughts in regards to training. Had the concert been a gun-friendly zone, wouldn't have mattered. I can almost definitively say that because of how far away the shooter was. Your little single-stack 9mm ankle gun or your little double-stack Glock 19 appendix carry is not going to get the work done at the distance that shooter was away. And even if you are pretty confident that you could hit a man-sized target at roughly 300 meters, consider the fact that you're shooting a pistol, and if you miss, that room is surrounded by all these other rooms, and there's people in those rooms who you shouldn't be shooting at. So you have to kind of have an honest conversation with yourself if you're one of those guys out there saying, well, I would have done this, or I would have ran to my truck and got my rifle. Yeah, maybe, but that's a maybe, and it's a what if. And if you weren't there, then it's kind of hard for you to necessarily say what you would have done. I've never been through an event like that. I know countless people who've never been through an event like that. The problem is that's the only time an event specifically like that, under those circumstances, is going to happen. There may be other events that are similar to it, but it's hard to presuppose the future based on what just happened or based on what you think might happen. Most likely to least likely. You're much more likely to need your firearm at a closer distance, but I think this situation proves that there can be exceptions to every rule. What I think was most important, or would have been most important in this situation, is medical training. If you can't get the shooter, can you help the people he's already injured? Do you carry at least a tourniquet? And I'm not talking about using your fucking belt, because your belt is not a tourniquet. Have you had a basic medical training class? Do you know how to properly apply pressure to chest wounds, abdominal wounds? Do you know how to apply a tourniquet properly? Do you know where to put it? These are important questions. We've gotten people to where they carry their gun and they carry a knife and a flashlight, and maybe they've got like some kind of like knuck, and then they've got a pen and a lighter and like all these other things that are in their part of their EDC. I don't see a lot of tourniquets. Oh, is it stupid to carry a tourniquet? I don't know. I can tell you this, in the past year, I haven't needed to point my gun at anyone, but I've come upon 3 vehicular accidents. 2 of them were pretty bad rollovers. I had a tourniquet with me each time. Now, I didn't need the tourniquet at all, but that just goes to the point. I didn't need my gun either, but I had both. It's very easy for someone to, outside of a shooting situation, suffer an injury where the tourniquet is much more likely to be useful than the firearm. I'm not advocating you stop carrying your gun, because that would be foolish, but if you're not carrying at least medical knowledge with you, then you're not doing the total package of training for preparation. I'm not trying to guilt anybody into anything. I'm not saying you need to run out and take a medical class. I'm saying you need to consider the fact that if you don't have medical knowledge, maybe you should acquire some. Maybe instead of taking a 3rd handgun class next year, you should take 2 classes and a medical class, or maybe just take all medical classes. I think you'll find the information that you learn in these classes will make you much more capable of assisting in non-critical emergencies as well. People freeze in situations where there's injuries because they don't know what to do. And they don't know what to do because they probably haven't been trained, or that stupid business required or employer required first aid class didn't really prepare them for what they're looking at. They haven't had a class in trauma. They haven't had a class on how to deal with gunshot wounds. People with training tend to do better in those situations, not just dealing with assisting and rendering aid to those who've been injured, but also dealing with the mental costs that we have. As of right now, there's 59 dead and over 500 wounded. 500 wounded. I mean, that number doesn't even really register if you think about it. 500 people wounded. And it's not really, the word wounded doesn't really grant any gravity to how grievous some of these wounds could be. People are probably going to lose limbs or bodily functions. Quality of life is seriously going to be affected. But we usually only kind of register that how many people actually lost their lives versus how many people's lives have been changed forever. The better you can prepare yourself to deal with the mental costs, if you find yourself in one of these situations, the better off you're going to be. So while I'm certainly not trying to guilt anyone into running out and taking a class, because I don't really believe in that. I mean, I do teach an active shooter response class. I had somebody ask me, hey, are you going to change any of the curriculum in your class? And I was like, no, my class already addresses this situation. And this friend of mine was like, what are you talking about? How could you possibly address this situation? I was like, no, it does. It totally addresses this situation. One of the founding principles of my citizen response to active shooter class is act within your ability in a situation where you can realistically render any assistance. This is one of those situations where I think none of the students I've ever had come through class would be like, I'm going to take shots at this guy. Many of them probably would have been like, okay, it's time to at least render aid or start helping get some of these people out of this situation, or more knowledgeably help people identify what's cover versus what's concealment. If you find a really good place to hide and somebody's hiding behind a trash can, you can be like, hey bro, that's not going to stop gunfire. Maybe you should come over here with me. Be the light to lead people out of situations like that. And the more you know, the better you can do that. Never let your enthusiasm overcome your capability, which requires you to have an honest assessment of what your skill set exactly is. Are we going to see another mass shooting? Probably. I can almost say definitely we're going to. That's just one of the negative aspects of certain socioeconomic and political conditions that currently exist within the United States. I think it's going to get worse, or it's going to stay the same, and then it's going to get better. And it's going to get better when we actually take an honest look at what is the underlying reason for these shootings. And we all know, especially if you're watching this video, you probably agree with me, it's not guns. That's just the tool. It's the person behind the gun. What are their motivations, and how do we affect a change to prevent or make something like this so complicated to perform that it's not even worth it, and they're going to seek ways to get their message out in some other way. That's my feelings on the subject at this point. I'm sure more will come later. Big takeaways: honest assessment of your own skill set. Don't let your enthusiasm overcome capability. Be patient. Allow the information to come out as it does. And if at the end of the day you still don't believe the official story, then that's fine. But you shouldn't jump to conclusions on anything. Trust but verify kind of thing. Medical training, get some. If you don't have some, get some. If you haven't had it in a while, get some. I'll be going to a few medical classes coming in 2018 because it's been a few years since I've had a really comprehensive class. I'm still comfortable in my skill set, but I want to learn more. I have an instructor, John, who's capable of teaching medical related stuff, and beginning with him and trying to develop a basic curriculum that we can, if not offer a standalone class, then incorporate it to existing classes so people get a little more value for what they're paying for their classes. Carry, at the very least, a tourniquet. I have a tourniquet on me at all times. I've done a video on it in the past. It's in an ankle kit. Tourniquet's not silly, especially when you consider the implications of not having one. Think of it the same way as not having your gun. What are the implications of not having your gun? There's all kinds of cute little sayings and t-shirts regarding not being armed. So what are the implications of not having a tourniquet, at the very least? Now you can add to that based on your skill level. My vehicle's got a tourniquet in it. All my bags have tourniquets in them. I have so many tourniquets that I could lose a tourniquet, and if I really needed one, I could probably find one pretty easy, because there's the ones I know where they are, and they're the ones that are like, where's that one at? Which is a good problem to have. More tourniquets than you know what to do with, just in case. You acquire them over time. They don't really expire, especially if you keep them in good condition. So not really an issue there. If you have any other specific questions on any of the topics in this video, feel free to drop a comment in the section below. If there's another video that you'd like to see done or another question you'd like to see answered, you can obviously put that in the question section below. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.